When you think of Sweden, what springs to mind? For most of us, it's probably that rock-solid welfare state, right? An unbelievably high quality of life, maybe, cutting-edge innovation, and, let's be honest, undeniable economic success. It's been a global benchmark for decades, and really for good reason. But what if I told you that this very success might now be casting a bit of a long shadow, creating a set of, well, perplexing challenges that are actually slowing its economic momentum?
Yeah, it's a fascinating setup, a country that's done so much right-facing, well, unexpected headwinds.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into some independent research from McKinsey. It's actually titled The Paradoxes of Sweden's Success and Struggles and the Path Forward. And this isn't just some dry economic analysis. It's a framing piece prepared for the Swedish CEO Summit.
Right, it pulls together a lot of different threads. Macroeconomic data, sure, but also deep company insights and even interviews with over 50 top Swedish CEOs.
So it gives us this nonpartisan, data-driven look at a nation that seems to be at a bit of a crossroads.
hmm And you have to remember the context. For the past 30 years, Sweden really has been an economic juggernaut. I mean, outperforming much of Europe, nearly matching the U.S. in economic progress for a long stretch.
But recent trends, and this report really highlights them, suggest a pretty significant shift is underway, one that definitely demands a closer look.
And what's truly fascinating, I think, is how deeply rooted Sweden's historical strengths are. These aren't just numbers on a page, they're the fundamental building blocks that have shaped a remarkably successful nation.
Absolutely. So let's unpack this legacy of success first, maybe.
Okay, so between 1995 and 2024, Sweden's real GDP grew annually at 2.2%.
Which is remarkable growth.
It really is. Significantly outperforming the EU average and, well, until recently, almost on par with the US. A lot of this stems from its highly innovative, knowledge-based, and incredibly export-led economy.
Exports are huge for them.
Massive. Think about it. Exports make up well over 55% of its entire GDP. If you exclude the public sector, it's closer to 70%. That just shows profound international competitiveness.
And that export-driven model, it really speaks volumes about their industrial strength, their ability to compete globally.
Right, and you couple that with an incredibly efficient financial system. Sweden consistently ranks among the top in Europe for its robust public and private capital markets. That's crucial funding for businesses and innovation.
But it's not just about the money, though, is it? The quality of life aspect is huge.
Oh, absolutely central. Sweden consistently ranks in the top 5 OECD countries for basically everything you'd want. Life expectancy, happiness, health, social mobility, equality, sustainability, trust.
It's quite a list.
It is. Imagine living somewhere where 97% of people are satisfied with their local water quality, or where over 60% trust their fellow citizens. That's a strong social fabric.
And financially, they're also in a great position. Very low public debt, right?
One of the lowest ratios in the EU, yeah. Around 33.5% of GDP. That gives them immense financial flexibility.
So these are really enduring strengths. But the report, it sort of asks this provocative question.
Can a system that worked so well for so long adapt? Or does its very structure risk becoming a liability now?
Exactly. These aren't isolated achievements. They represent this carefully constructed model. But even strengths need to evolve.
And that's precisely the hinge point. The report identifies these 7 core paradoxes. They explain how Sweden's impressive momentum has, well, stalled.
Sold how much?
We're talking about a nearly 1 percentage point negative swing in real GDP per capita growth over the last decade.
Wow.
Yeah, so Sweden is now trailing both the US and the EU average.
And that lost momentum has a real cost, I assume.
A huge one. The report estimates it at around 650 billion Swedish kroner in lost GDP.
Just to put that staggering figure in perspective for you listening, that's equivalent to their entire national healthcare budget.
It's a massive number, really underscores the stakes.
Okay, so let's dive into these 7 paradoxes. First up, the productivity puzzle. Sweden seems to have all the ingredients for success here. Global corporate champions, massive R&D investment, spending more than the US and EU as a percentage of GDP.
Right, 3.6% of GDP on R&D. That's high.
But despite all this, the report highlights a, well, surprising and significant decline in productivity growth, especially in those crucial export sectors. What's going on?
That's the puzzle, exactly. And the core insight here seems to be that Sweden's R&D focus might be misdirected.
Misdirected how?
Well, while they spend heavily, the majority of that investment by the big corporations is actually funneling into more mature, slower growth sectors.
Hmm.
So for instance, half of their R&D goes into industrial engineering and automotive. Those sectors grew at a pretty meager 2%.
Okay.
Now, contrast that with the US, where about a third of R&D fuels high-growth software, which is expanding at 10% annually.
I see. So it's not just how much they spend, but where they spend it.
Precisely. And that allocation difference represents a huge opportunity cost. The report pegs it at around 360 billion SEK, more than half of that total lost momentum figure we mentioned.
Wow. Okay. So shifting gears from productivity, another critical area is the unicorn outflow. Sweden is known as a startup powerhouse, right? More unicorns per capita than anywhere else in Europe.
That's right. And even a huge chunk, 36% of Europe's decacorns, those $10 billion plus companies originated there. They're brilliant at creating these champions.
But the report says over 70% of their valuation leaves the country, usually acquired by foreign companies or listed abroad. Now, is this necessarily a struggle, or is that just, the natural way things go for successful startups in a global economy?
That's a fair question, and yeah, it's probably a bit of a fine line. Some outflow is natural, maybe even expected. But the scale of it here is what's flagged as concerning.
Why is it happening on that scale?
The report points to a few things. The lure of strategic acquisition by foreign buyers is a big one. 84% of exits are that way. Then there's the need for access to larger markets, uncertainty around local tax and regulation, maybe higher valuations abroad, and even better access to talent elsewhere.
So the insight is that Sweden isn't keeping the full value.
Exactly. They're not retaining the full long-term value, the job creation, the follow-on opportunities. The talent and capital don't always stick around to cultivate the next wave of local growth. That's estimated at about 20 billion SEK in lost GDP potential.
Okay, and it's not just the corporate world. The welfare state itself faces a curious challenge, number 3. Administrative bloat. Sweden's welfare state is world famous, and Swedes have really high trust in public institutions, among the highest in Europe.
Absolutely. A core strength.
Yet the report found that between 2014 and 2024, the number of administrative and management staff in the public sector grew 3 times faster than frontline staff like doctors, nurses, police officers.
Yeah, 35% growth in admin versus only 12% growth on the front lines.
And what was the impact of that?
Well, fewer consultations per doctor or nurse, down 30%, and 14% fewer convictions per police officer. So productivity seems to have dropped in those core services.
So the insight here is that even a well-regarded system needs efficiency checks. Otherwise, it can become a drag.
Precisely. If public sector productivity had just stayed at its previous level, the report estimates an additional 80 billion SEK in GDP could have been generated.
It kind of sounds like maybe some of those famous fika coffee breaks are now being spent in extra admin meetings instead of directly serving the public?
It certainly raises that important question about how growth in administration impacts the actual delivery of core public services.
Then there's this bureaucratic friction. Paradox number 4, regulatory speed versus permitting slowness. Sweden is apparently really fast at implementing new regulations. Third among EU countries, 8,000 new laws in 10 years.
They're quick on the uptake with rules.
But the flip side is that getting permits, actually getting things done under those rules, is slowing down dramatically.
Yeah, lead times increased anywhere from 50% to 300% over the last decade for crucial projects, energy, environment, construction.
And they're slow on things like wind power.
Among the slowest in Europe for wind power permitting, actually.
Yeah, they must have a direct cost.
It does. The report attributes 40 billion SEK in lost GDP directly to these scaling regulatory costs and delays. It's not just about having rules, it's about having a system that lets progress happen without getting bogged down.
Yeah, it reminds me of the frustration people feel getting a simple building permit, but then you scale that up to national energy projects. It's a huge bottleneck.
Exactly.
Okay, let's turn to a human paradox now, number 5. Despite high employment rates, Sweden is dealing with a surprising rise in structural unemployment. They have the 10th highest employment rate in the OECD, created 640,000 jobs in 10 years. Sounds great.
On the surface, yes. But structural unemployment, that mismatch between skills available and skills needed, has actually increased by 1.5 percentage points in the same period.
And there's another twist, too, about working hours.
Right. Swedes work about 10% fewer hours than the average EU worker and 20% less than in the US. And the total hours worked per capita have basically stagnated.
Why does structural unemployment rise?
The report points to that worsening skills match as a core problem. It suggests this is partly linked to challenges in integrating the foreign-born population, who made up 70% of Sweden's population increase from 2014 to 2023.
And regulations?
Also a factor, Sweden has high employment protection regulations, 10th highest in the OECD, which can sometimes reduce labor market flexibility.
So the insight is clear. Fixing this could add significant value.
Yeah, returning to previous structural unemployment levels could add another 60 billion SEK to GDP. It really underscores the need for better workforce alignment and integration.
Sixth paradox, the education gap. Sweden has high overall education rates. Nearly half the population has tertiary education, and they spend a lot per student.
High inputs, yes, but the outcomes aren't quite matching up in key areas.
Such as?
They're lacking graduates in crucial strategic fields. About 40% fewer STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, math graduates than comparable countries like Denmark or Germany. Also, vocational program enrollment is relatively low compared to the EU average.
And the value of a degree.
There's a surprisingly low wage premium from getting a tertiary education in Sweden, only about a 25% increase compared to a 52% average boost across the EU.
And even basic education quality is slipping.
According to international benchmarks like the PISA scores, yes, there have been declines.
So this is more than just numbers. It's a foundational issue for the future economy.
Absolutely. The report estimates closing these skills and competency gaps could add 30 billion SEK to Sweden's GDP. It really highlights that just spending money doesn't guarantee you get the right skills for the market.
Okay, and the final paradox, number 7, infrastructure debt. Sweden was leader here, right?
Right.
Widespread fiber, green, affordable electricity, nearly fossil-free power.
Historically, yes, a real strength. 99% fossil-free electricity is amazing.
But now...
Now, maintenance debt for things like roads and railways has almost doubled in just a decade, up to 105 billion SEK.
So infrastructure is aging and not being kept up.
Seems so. And they're no longer leading in digital either. They rank 19th in the EU for 5G coverage and apparently lack a clear roadmap for 6G.
And energy. Despite being green, there are challenges.
Big ones. The country needs to expand energy generation by something like 60% in the next 20 years to meet demand, especially for industry and electrification. But there isn't a cohesive national plan to actually achieve that.
And the cost of inaction.
Estimated at 50 billion SEK in lost GDP from postponed investments due to these infrastructure bottlenecks and uncertainties.
So, taken together, these 7 paradoxes paint quite a picture.
They really do. They clearly show that while past successes built a really robust nation, a failure to adapt those very strengths can turn them into current liabilities.
The challenge isn't really a lack of resources or capability, is it?
No, not fundamentally. It seems to be more about a need for a shift in focus and execution to ensure these foundational elements remain strengths for the future, not anchors to the past.
So what does this all mean for Sweden's future, then? Beyond these internal paradoxes, the report also highlights 5 powerful global forces that are reshaping the world.
Yeah, and these aren't trivial. They have the potential to swing Swedish GDP by up to 1 trillion Swedish kroner over the next 10 years.
A trillion, that's what, 15% of their GDP?
Roughly, yes. It's a massive potential swing, positive or negative, depending on how they navigate these forces.
Okay, let's look at the first one. New global competition. What does that mean?
It means competition isn't just about lean manufacturing or who can make things cheapest anymore. It's shifting towards what the report calls innovation execution.
Innovation execution.
Yeah, things like sharply reducing costs through innovation, rapidly scaling up capacity, and dramatically increasing speed to market. And right now, China and the US are really leading the charge here.
And this shift is already having an impact.
Definitely. You see market shares shifting away from Europe, including Sweden. Take electric vehicles. Chinese EVs are reportedly 60% cheaper, have 10% better battery performance, and get to market 50% faster than European counterparts.
Wow.
Or look at telecoms. Between 2018 and 2024, Sweden's global market share declined by 10%, while China's rose by 30%.
And this isn't just an abstract issue for big companies, right? This affects everyday people.
Absolutely. It directly impacts the availability, the cost, the features of products and services that you and I rely on every single day.
Okay, second global force, the AI and automation revolution.
Right. AI and automation are projected to automate maybe half of today's work tasks sometime between 2030 and 2060. That promises a potentially massive leap in productivity.
And Sweden's position here, they're quite digitalized, aren't they?
They are. fourth most digitalized European country, so they have a strong foundation to build on. However, the report suggests they're lagging in broad AI adoption across the economy. They rank only 25th globally on the Global AI Index.
So there's a big opportunity there if they can catch up.
Huge. The report estimates somewhere between 200 to 300 billion SEK in potential value if AI is fully adopted across the economy.
Then number 3, the new geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, this is about heightened strategic competition, reshaping global trade patterns, supply chains, and also accelerating defense spending.
And Sweden's vulnerability here comes from its trade dependency.
Exactly. With both exports and imports making up over half of its GDP, it's particularly vulnerable to trade shocks or supply chain disruptions. And because they trade a lot in complex manufactured goods, they're also quite exposed to potential tariffs or trade barriers.
But there's an upside too, potentially, in defense.
Potentially, yes. Sweden has a mature and capable defense industry. With countries increasing defense spending, especially with Sweden joining NATO and pledging 2% of GDP, not 5% as mentioned earlier, but 2% according to the NATO target, its defense sector could see significant benefits.
Okay, and beyond those 3 big forces, the report briefly touches on 2 others. The green transition.
Yeah.
You mentioned Sweden's a leader here.
Yes, definitely a front runner. 98% fossil-free electricity, significant emission reductions already achieved. There's a huge economic opportunity there. The report estimates 150 to 250 billion SEK in potential growth related to green tech and services.
But there's a note of caution.
A slight one. The report points out a global trend where corporate interest in sustainability, or at least the buzz around ESG, seems to be slowing a bit. Mentions declined 34% in the US and even 7% in Sweden. So maintaining that focus is crucial to realize the potential.
And finally, demographics. The aging population. How does Sweden compare?
Interestingly, this is one area where Sweden might have a comparative advantage over much of Western Europe.
Why is that?
Thanks to relatively recent immigration and a slightly more balanced age structure, their median age is 41, fertility rate a bit higher than the EU average. The demographic pressures are expected to be less severe. This could offer a small relative economic benefit, maybe 10 to 50 billion SEK, compared to neighbors facing steeper aging challenges.
So these global forces, they're like powerful currents that Sweden really has to navigate proactively.
Absolutely. They can't just let these happen to them. The real question for leaders and for the country isn't just if they can adapt, but how they'll strategically transform these global shifts, these challenges, into genuine opportunities for growth.
Right. So what's the path forward then? The report doesn't just diagnose the problems. It lays out a pretty bold agenda, doesn't it?
It does. It proposes a path for Sweden to reclaim its position as one of the world's best performing nations.
And the goal is ambitious.
Very. Achieve 2.0 to 2.5% annual GDP per capita growth. That's significantly above the current baseline projection of around 1.6%.
And that difference translates into?
It means potentially adding an extra 500 billion SEK to the economy, beyond what current consensus forecasts predict. A huge prize.
Okay, so what are the key elements of this agenda? What's step 1?
The first and perhaps most fundamental is to establish a long-term vision.
Meaning a national strategy.
Exactly. A clear, ambitious national strategy that goes beyond short-term election cycles. Something broadly shared and agreed upon by employers, unions, civil society. Set ambitious targets, like that 2.0 to 2.5% growth goal.
Are there examples of other countries doing this?
Sure. The report mentions Denmark, Singapore, Ireland as countries that used clear national strategies effectively. Even Germany's recent Made for Germany initiative aims for something similar.
And why is that vision so crucial?
It provides that stable, predictable environment needed for long-term development and investment. Without that shared direction, efforts can become fragmented, reactive, constantly shifting with political winds, which undermines confidence.
Makes sense. Okay, second point.
Accelerate innovation execution. This goes back to that productivity puzzle.
So not just spending on R&D, but
actually doubling the speed of innovation, learning from global competitors, and crucially, strategically shifting at least half of that R&D investment into faster-growing, future-oriented sectors. The report really emphasizes that productivity is the single most important long-term driver of economic growth, and execution is absolutely key to actually getting results from those investments.
third.
Grow high-potential industries. Sweden has what the report calls a right to win in several future high-growth areas. Things like AI software, fintech, climate tech, biotech, future defense systems, private equity. The idea is to strategically allocate resources to these promising sectors.
Wow.
By providing the right conditions, things like regulatory sandboxes to test new ideas, better access to capital, ensuring skilled workers are available, and fostering strong ecosystems, partnerships between universities, startups, and established companies.
And critically, this isn't just about starting new businesses.
No, it's about creating an environment where they stay and scale within Sweden. Preventing that unicorn outflow we talked about. It's about nurturing the next generation of big Swedish companies right there at home.
Okay, fourth point. Drive output in the public sector. This tackles that administrative bloat issue.
Exactly. The focus needs to shift dramatically. Away from just measuring inputs like how much is spent, towards measuring outputs and real-world impact and results.
So less admin, more frontline.
Actively reduce the administrative burden, yes, and prioritize growing the frontline personnel faster. Make those frontline careers more attractive. Also, capture economies of scale. Consolidate some operational structures, professionalize public procurement, maybe centralize IT more effectively, boost that public sector productivity.
Fifth point.
Mhm.
Increase attractiveness for talent and capital. This sounds fundamental.
It really is. For talent, it means addressing some basic quality of life issues that might deter people, things like crime, housing availability, access to international schools, even healthcare access for non-natives.
And proactive policy.
Yes, policies to actively attract world-class international talent, streamlining work permits, making it easier for foreign students who graduate there to stay, maybe targeted tax relief for key skills.
And for capital.
Working towards more unified capital markets, maybe through EU-level collaboration for things like shared stock listing infrastructure, and critically, reinforcing a predictable, stable business environment. Investors hate uncertainty.
Yeah, you can see how a lot of the paradoxes kind of converge here. Attracting and keeping talent and capital seems like a key enabler for almost everything else.
Absolutely. Without getting that right, even the best laid plans in other areas are likely to falter.
Okay, and the final point, number 6. It seems quite broad.
It is, but it bundles together crucial enabling investments. Invest in regulatory reform, infrastructure, and human capital.
So break that down. Regulatory reform.
Simplify regulations and speed up those permitting processes we discussed. Maybe a dedicated task force to specifically shorten lead times and increase predictability for businesses.
Infrastructure.
Accelerate investments in digital infrastructure, 5G, 6G. Develop that comprehensive national energy expansion strategy, perhaps learning from Finland. Upgrade transport, tackling that road and rail maintenance backlog. And look at expanding private financing options for infrastructure projects.
And human capital. The skills gap.
Build that skilled workforce. Better guidance for students towards needed fields, more STEM graduates, strengthening vocational programs, massive reskilling efforts for areas like AI and sustainability. Improve the integration of immigrants into the workforce, and increase labor market flexibility, perhaps looking at models like Denmark's Flexicurity, which tries to balance easier hiring and firing with strong social safety nets. Plus, accelerating AI adoption across the board.
So if you connect all these dots, these 6 areas, they're all deeply interconnected, aren't they?
Completely. You can't really fix one without addressing the others. Tackling these proactively rather than waiting for a crisis or reacting piece by piece seems absolutely essential. This isn't just a wish list. The report frames it as a strategic imperative for Sweden's long-term prosperity.
And the report paints a very clear picture of the potential payoff here, if Sweden does implement this kind of bold agenda.
A very clear and very attractive picture, yes. It suggests Sweden could achieve that 2.3% GDP per capita growth annually.
Which means adding that astounding 500 billion SEK beyond current forecasts.
Right. And that would propel Sweden from 13th in the OECD GDP per capita rankings in 2024, potentially up to 8th by 2034.
That's a significant leap.
Huge. And it translates into tangible benefits for people. Potentially over 100,000 new jobs, lower unemployment, higher tax revenues to fund public services, and ultimately increased disposable income and better pension savings for citizens.
So the potential is enormous, but it requires significant change.
Transformative change, really.
Sweden's history often shows that ambitious reforms tend to happen in times of crisis. It makes you wonder, what would it actually take for a nation, any nation really, to embrace such transformative change before a full-blown crisis forces its hand? Is that kind of proactive evolution the ultimate paradox to overcome for sustained prosperity? Something for you to ponder.